My girlfriend said, "I can replace you easily anytime I want." I let her believe that and walked away. Months later, she couldn't replace what she lost, and I never gave her another chance to try again. You know what your problem is? You actually think I need you. I remember exactly where I was standing when she said that. Right in the middle of our kitchen, 2 years and 8 months of my life staring back at me from across a marble countertop we had picked out together. She wasn't screaming it. She wasn't even angry when she said it. She said it the way someone announces that the milk has gone bad, matter of fact, casual, faintly inconvenienced by having to say it at all. I can replace you easily, anytime I want. She let that sit in the air for a second. You should be grateful I'm still here. I didn't say anything. I didn't slam a door. I didn't throw anything. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in nearly 3 years, I saw her with complete clarity. No filter, no wishful thinking, no grace giving, just her. And what I saw in that moment made the decision for me, quietly, without drama, without ceremony. What happened next, she was not prepared for. Here is what you need to understand before I continue, because this story matters more when you understand what was at stake. I wasn't some man who had nothing to lose. I had plans with this woman, real ones, the kind you actually think about in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday when nothing special is happening, the kind you talk about late at night when the city is quiet and the future feels close enough to reach out and touch. We had talked about a house, not obsessively, not frantically, just in the easy, natural way people do when they believe in each other. We'd picked a neighborhood, not the most expensive one, not the flashiest. Somewhere quiet with good coffee close by, the kind of street where people actually walk their dogs. We had talked about what we'd name a dog someday. We had a whole argument, a genuinely passionate one, about the name, and she had one, and I'd pretended to be annoyed about it for 3 days, and then quietly admitted she was right. We had talked about everything, and I was all in. Not halfway in with escape routes mapped. Not cautiously in with one foot still out the door. Completely, unreservedly, stubbornly all in. I didn't keep emotional backup plans. I didn't flirt my way through life waiting to see if something better came along. I loved her the way I thought love was supposed to work. You choose it, you show up for it. You don't constantly re-audition for your own relationship. So when she stood there and told me I was replaceable, when she told me I should be grateful she was still around, I didn't react the way she expected. I didn't rage. I didn't beg. I got very, very quiet. And quiet, I would learn, is the most dangerous thing I could have done. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Not in the way she expected, and not in the way I expected either. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 29 when this happened. She was 27. We'd been together for 2 years and 8 months. Almost 3 full years of our lives wrapped up in each other. We shared an apartment we'd chosen as a couple, decorated as a couple, had petty disputes about throw pillows as a couple. That's all the setup you need. Her name was Cassandra. Everyone in her casual orbit called her Cassie. Anyone who had ever crossed her, or anyone she wanted to keep at a slight distance, got the full name. I called her Cassie for 2 years and 8 months. Somewhere in the last few months, I'd started using her full name in my own head without realizing I was doing it. That probably should have told me something. When we first got together, she was warm in a way that felt genuinely rare. Not performed warmth. The real kind. The kind that makes you feel chosen, specifically, out of all the available options. She had a laugh that was too loud for restaurants and completely unguarded. The kind of laugh that didn't care who heard it. She remembered everything. Every offhand thing you'd mentioned 2 Octobers ago. Every name you'd mentioned in a story once. Every detail you didn't think anyone was actually filing away. She remembered the name of my 6th grade teacher because I'd mentioned her once in a story about something completely unrelated. She showed up, fully, consistently, without being asked. In the beginning. The first year was genuinely good. We fought the way couples fight. Over small things, over medium things, over things that felt enormous at the time and embarrassing in retrospect. But we always came back to each other. There was gravity between us. The kind that feels like it will outlast most things. The second year was when the ground started shifting. I can see it clearly now, looking back. At the time, I felt the shift, but I couldn't name it, and not being able to name something makes it very easy to ignore. She got promoted. A significant jump, senior strategist at her firm, a title that came with a new salary, new professional recognition, a whole new identity she got to try on every morning before she left the apartment. I was proud of her. Genuinely, entirely proud. I took her out to celebrate. Flowers she'd mentioned once, offhandedly, not even as a hint. I'd just been paying attention. A restaurant reservation we'd been meaning to make for over a year. She was glowing that night, animated and laughing, and so clearly happy. And I was happy watching her be happy. That's the thing no one tells you about loving someone. When they win, it genuinely feels like you're winning too. At least, for a while. The changes came slowly, almost invisibly at first. A slight adjustment in how she talked about her coworkers. Not mean, exactly, but a tone that hadn't been there before. A quality to some of her stories that felt less like sharing and more like performing. Performing status. Performing importance. She would come home and describe a meeting she'd run, a decision she'd made, a colleague she'd corrected, and there was something in the telling that was less about the day and more about confirming something for herself. I didn't say anything. Everyone gets a little inflated when they level up professionally. I'd had my own moments of it. I gave her grace. Probably more grace than I should have. Then her social landscape started rearranging itself. Her old friends, the ones I'd come to genuinely like over 2 years of dinners and birthdays and impromptu Sunday plans, started appearing less frequently. A woman named Brooke moved into the center of her world almost overnight. Brooke had the kind of personality that fills a room through sheer self-certainty rather than warmth. The first time I met her, she looked me over with the careful, clinical assessment of someone deciding whether something was worth keeping. "Oh," she said, "so you're the boyfriend." Not warmly. Not with the enthusiasm of someone who'd heard a lot about me. The way someone says, "Oh," when they finally see a piece of furniture that's been described to them, and it's not quite what they imagined. I remember thinking, very clearly, this woman has already decided she doesn't like me. I figured I'd change that over time. I figured that was just how Brooke operated, and that given enough dinners and enough proximity, she'd warm up. She never did. Brooke had a philosophy, and I use that word generously, because it was less a philosophy and more a survival strategy that had been promoted to a worldview. The core of it was this: successful women should always keep their options open. She said it constantly. At dinners. In passing. In texts that Cassie would sometimes show me, laughing, as if it were a running joke. But it was not a joke. I could feel the weight behind it every time it was said. I could feel the idea slowly doing something to how Cassie thought about herself inside the relationship. Like she was starting to evaluate our relationship the way her firm evaluated a client account. What's the return? What's the opportunity cost? What's the next best alternative? Small things changed. Cassie became harder to reach. Not dramatically. Not in any way I could hold up as evidence of something specific. In the way where you call and you get a text back 2.5 hours later. In the way where conversations that used to stretch naturally past midnight started having these quiet, early conclusions. In the way where she'd make plans with Brooke and mention it to me afterward, as a fact, rather than before, as something we navigated together. I noticed all of it. But I didn't want to be that person, the insecure one, the suspicious one, the one who panics the moment his girlfriend has a social life. So I held it. I filed it away. I told myself it was nothing. One night, she came home from a dinner I hadn't been included in. She walked in bright in a way she hadn't been around me in quite a while. Animated. A little breathless. "We met these guys tonight, friends of Brooke's. One of them works in finance, has his own place downtown, actually drives a..." She stopped, caught herself mid-sentence like she'd nearly walked off a ledge. Actually, never mind. But the sentence was already half standing in the air between us. "Never mind what?" I asked. "Nothing. I'm tired. Long night." She kissed me on the cheek. Then went to the bathroom to brush her teeth. I sat on the couch for a long time after that. Not spiraling. Just sitting. Just noticing how heavy the air in the apartment had gotten. I want to be honest about what came next, because this is the part people usually skip in stories like this. I started doing the math. Quietly, privately, in the back of my head where I tried not to let it get too loud. The late arrivals home. The half-finished sentences. The way she laughed at Brooke's texts in a way she hadn't laughed at anything I'd said in months. The way she dressed differently on the nights I wasn't invited along. The phone sleeping face down on the nightstand when it used to just live on its charging pad. I didn't have evidence of anything specific. I didn't want to be the kind of person who accuses without evidence. But something had changed in the architecture of us. Something structural. Something quiet. I tried talking to her about it. I want to be clear, this was not dramatic or escalated. It was just a conversation, the kind that couples are supposed to be able to have. I feel like we've been disconnected lately. I miss you. She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her in 2.5 years. It wasn't irritation exactly. It was more like the expression of someone who has been handed a task they consider slightly beneath them. I've been busy, she said. Work has been a lot. I know, but it's not just the work thing. It's, can we not do this tonight? I'm genuinely exhausted. And that was the end of it. She turned back to whatever she was looking at on her phone. I went to the kitchen. I stood there for a while, doing nothing, looking at the marble countertop. After that conversation, I started paying attention differently. Not obsessively, not in a way I'm proud of, just in the way you start really watching something after you've been fooled once. You don't blink as much. You notice more. She began taking calls in the bedroom with the door closed. She started giving vague, generalized answers to simple questions about her weekend. She was 3 layers of careful in a way she'd never needed to be before. One Saturday in late September, she told me she was going to be at Brooks for most of the day. Later that afternoon, I drove past Brooks' building on the way to meet my friend Owen for lunch. Her car was not in the parking lot. It was not on the street. It was not anywhere near the building. I kept driving. I didn't say anything when she got home. I didn't ask. I sat with it, and I told myself, still, that I didn't have enough. That I could be wrong. That 2 years and 8 months of love doesn't just disappear quietly, and I needed to be sure before I burned anything down. 3 weeks later, I found the message. Not by snooping. Let me be precise about this. Her phone was on the coffee table, face up, unlocked. It lit up as I walked past, and I glanced down out of pure reflex, the way anyone would. I saw a name I didn't recognize. A man's name. And a message preview below it that read, Saturday was perfect. When can we? The screen timed out before I could read the rest. I stood very still. She was in the shower. I could hear the water running from down the hall. I didn't pick up the phone. I thought about it. I put one hand near it, and then I didn't. I sat down on the couch. I sat there for a long time. I cannot fully explain why I didn't confront her that night. Part of it was still the old instinct. I need to be sure. I need more than a preview. I can't blow up 3 years on half a sentence. But there was another part. A bigger part. And it was this. I realized, sitting on that couch with the shower running, that something had already broken in me. Not loudly. Not in any moment I could point to specifically. It had cracked slowly, across weeks of quiet evidence I'd been refusing to acknowledge. And now I was sitting there noticing the fracture for the first time. The way you notice a crack in a wall you've walked past 100 times, and you suddenly understand it's been there for months. When she came out of the bathroom, she walked past me, picked up her phone from the coffee table without looking at me, and went to the bedroom. I ordered food. We ate in front of the television. She laughed at a show. I watched her laugh. And I thought, with a clarity I hadn't had in a very long time, she is sitting next to me, and she is somewhere else entirely. I need to tell you something now that I should have told you earlier, because it reframes everything that came before. 6 weeks before the kitchen argument, before she said what she said, I had coffee with Owen. A quiet Tuesday. Nothing significant about it. I told him things weren't great with Cassie. Not the specifics. Not the phone. Not the car not being at Brooks. Just, things aren't great. Owen got quiet. The specific kind of quiet that means he knows something he hasn't decided whether to say. What? I said. Nothing. Owen. He held his coffee cup with both hands and looked at the table. I saw Cassie a couple of weekends ago, he said. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure how to bring it up. I waited. She was with someone, he said. Downtown. That rooftop place on 5th. A man I didn't recognize. I didn't say anything. It might have been a work thing, he said. I genuinely don't know. It could have been completely fine. But it didn't look completely fine. He met my eyes. No, he said. It didn't look completely fine. I thanked him. I paid for both coffees. I drove home. And I did what I'd been doing for months. I put it away, told myself I wasn't certain, told myself I needed to be fair. But I already knew. Somewhere under all the fairness and all the caution and all the credit I kept extending, I already knew. I just wasn't ready. Not ready to say it out loud. Not ready to let go of the version of her that I'd fallen for. Because here's what no one tells you about being in this position. The hardest part isn't the betrayal. The betrayal is awful, but it's something you can get angry about. Something you can identify and move against. The hardest part is the grief. The grief for the person you thought they were. The grief for a future you spent real time building in your head, with real emotional investment, with a person who turned out to be wearing a costume underneath all of it. Letting go of that future is the part that takes the most out of you. Not the anger, the grief. And then came the argument. The one that produced the line. It started small, the way the worst arguments always do. I asked her, calmly and specifically, why she had told me she was at Brooks one night when I knew she had not been at Brooks. A simple question. A fair question. I wasn't accusing her of anything specific. I was asking her to account for a discrepancy. She didn't flinch. I was with Brooke. We changed locations. Why are you tracking my movements? I'm not tracking your movements. I drove past Brooks' building, and your car wasn't there. So you're checking up on me. I'm asking a question. Because you don't trust me. You haven't been giving me much reason to. And that's when the temperature shifted. That's when it stopped being a conversation and became something else. Her voice dropped to something flatter. Something colder. I don't have to answer to you, she said. I'm not accountable to you like you're my. She stopped. You don't own me. I've never suggested I did. You're acting like it. I'm acting like a man who shares an apartment with his girlfriend and would like basic honesty. Maybe that's the problem, she said. What's the problem? You thinking you have some claim on me just because we're together? I looked at her for a long moment. Cassandra, don't what? Don't use that tone. Don't act like you're so irreplaceable. There it was. That word landing like the first brick. What does that mean? I asked. It means exactly what it sounds like. A pause. You know what your problem is? You actually think I need you. She let that breathe in the room. I can replace you easily, anytime I want. Another pause. She looked right at me. You should be grateful I'm still here. The kitchen went completely silent. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that falls after something breaks. She was waiting. I could see it in the way she was standing, shoulders back, chin up, a kind of defiant anticipation. She wanted the fight. She wanted me to raise my voice so she could frame this as me being unstable. She wanted me to beg so she could feel the power of refusing. She wanted me to do something that would make this my fault. I didn't give her any of it. I nodded once, said nothing, walked to the bedroom, got under the covers, turned off the lamp. She stood in the doorway. I could feel her there, even in the dark, waiting to see if I'd say something. Then I heard her footsteps go down the hall. Then the television turned on in the living room. And I lay in the dark, completely still, and I made my decision. Quietly, without drama, without theatrics. I made it the way you make a decision that has already made itself. You just stop pretending you haven't made it. Over the next 2 weeks, I began the process of leaving. Carefully, methodically. I called Owen the next morning and told him I needed a place to stay for a couple of weeks. He said okay without asking me to explain. I started moving my things out gradually. Not in boxes, nothing that dramatic. Just things in bags, in the back of my car, over a series of unremarkable evenings. Books that were mine. Equipment for work. Things that were unmistakably mine and would not be missed immediately. I wasn't trying to sneak. I was trying to avoid a scene. I didn't want the tearful confrontation where she told me I was overreacting. I didn't want the version of events where she reframed what she'd said until I doubted my own ears. I wanted a clean exit. The kind that doesn't leave room for negotiation. On a Thursday in October, nothing remarkable about it. Overcast sky, the kind of cold that hasn't fully committed. I made my last trip. The apartment was still furnished, still hers in every meaningful way. I left a note on the counter. No accusations. No list of everything she'd done. No final speech. Just, I think you were right. I don't think you need me. I hope you're okay. Take care of yourself. I left my key next to it. I closed the door. I got in my car. I drove to Owen's apartment. I sat on his couch. He turned on a game without asking me what happened. At some point, he handed me a beer. At some point, I don't know exactly when, I noticed that the thing I felt most was not sadness, not anger, not grief, even relief. Clean, honest, deep relief. Like something I'd been carrying for months had finally been allowed to be put down. She called at 8:47 that night. I let it go. She called at 9:03, at 9:31, at 9:55. The texts started coming around 10. What is this? Where are your things? Are you serious right now? Then, call me back. Then, this is insane. We need to talk about this. Then, at 11:20, a longer one. I know I said something stupid. I was angry and I went way too far, and you know I didn't mean it the way it came out. Please just come home so we can talk about it. Don't make a decision like this without talking to me first. I read every single message. I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I was trying to punish her, but because I was done. Not performed done. Actually done. The kind of done that doesn't need to announce itself. I stayed at Owen's for 2 weeks while I arranged a new apartment. In those 2 weeks, she called 14 times. She texted more than I counted. She came to Owen's building once. He told her I wasn't there. She left. Here is the part of the story that people rarely tell, because everyone focuses on the confrontation, the exit, the dramatic moment. But the real story, the one that actually answers the question she raised that night in the kitchen, is what happened in the months after. My new apartment was a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a building that had a courtyard you could see from the kitchen window. Narrow kitchen, quiet street. I didn't know what to do with silence at first. 2.5 years of another person's presence, habits, sounds, rhythms, and then nothing. Just the ambient noise of a city outside a window. I felt the absence acutely for the first few weeks. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. I missed her, not the last version of her, but the early one. The one with the unguarded laugh. The one who remembered everything. But underneath the missing, there was something I hadn't expected. Clarity. Profound, uncomplicated clarity. I rebuilt slowly. I went back to things I'd quietly stopped doing without ever consciously deciding to stop. Morning runs. I'd abandoned those because she liked sleeping late on weekends and the sound of me getting ready would drift through the apartment. Cooking things she didn't like, which turned out to be a fairly long list that overlapped significantly with things I genuinely loved. Long phone calls with my brother, which I'd been cutting short because they tended to run over an hour and she'd get restless and faintly resentful about the time. I hadn't really noticed, how much of myself I'd been quietly compressing to fit more easily into the space she'd allowed me. You don't feel it while you're doing it. It happens so gradually that you adjust without tracking the adjustment. And then one day you have space again, and you realize how small you'd been making yourself, and you don't go back. Professionally, I held steady. I'm a graphic designer, brand identity work, some editorial projects. 6 years into it, with clients I respected and work I was actually proud of. Work had always been my constant regardless of what was happening in the personal side of my life. I threw myself into it after I left. I took on 2 new clients in October alone. I stayed later than I needed to, not out of avoidance exactly, but because I'd rediscovered what it felt like to be absorbed in something that was purely mine. A few weeks after I left, at a design industry conference I'd registered for months earlier, a woman laughed at something I said. Really laughed, the full-body kind. The kind that makes you feel like you actually said something worth saying. Her name was Vera. She worked in editorial design, had opinions about typography that she stated with complete confidence, and was one of the most present people I'd ever sat across a table from. We had coffee after the conference. Lunch the following week. Something that started slowly and became real without either of us forcing it. I'm not going to make this story about Vera because this isn't her story to be in, but she matters in the sense that she reminded me, quickly, vividly, what it felt like to be in the presence of someone who was actually there. Not half there, not strategically present, actually, fully, genuinely there. Meanwhile, through Owen, who still had connections in the overlapping social world, I was getting updates on Cassandra. I want to be clear, I wasn't asking for these updates. Owen offered them the way a good friend offers things, not to be cruel, not to score points, but because he thought I should know. Here's what happened to Cassandra after I left. She tried to replace me. Almost immediately. The man from the phone, the one whose name I'd half-read in that message preview, apparently did not materialize into what she'd imagined he would be. Owen heard, through 2 people, that they'd seen each other once or twice after I left, and it had ended without ceremony. He wasn't interested in anything serious. He'd been treating her, from the beginning, as an option, the same way she'd been treating me. The symmetry of that struck me when Owen told me. I didn't say anything about it out loud. I just let it sit there in my head for a moment, and then I moved on. She went back to Brooke's approach. Keep the options open. Stay in the market. She went to events. She met people. She dated, serially, actively, with the focused attention of someone working a problem. And here's what she found, from what I was hearing. Every new man was interesting for approximately 3 weeks. Then something would shift. They would cancel something important, or say something thoughtless, or reveal that they weren't really listening the way she needed to be listened to, or they just wouldn't understand the specific way she needed to be understood, the particular grammar of her moods, the rhythm of her anxiety, the exact right thing to do when she came home from a day that had ground her down. She would move on. She would try again. Then the same result with different details. She was discovering something she hadn't anticipated, that what I had given her, the specific quality and consistency of it, was not something that could be easily replicated. Not because I was some exceptional person she'd never find an equivalent of, but because what we'd built had required time. Genuine time. The kind of time you can't rush or replicate or skip to the end of. I used to remember things about her, not as a performance, not to demonstrate that I was paying attention. I just paid attention. The way she took her coffee, not a complicated order, but specific. The name of the coworker who dismissed her in a meeting 8 months ago and still made her jaw tighten when his name came up. The fact that she needed a full 24 hours of quiet after any large social event, or she'd start getting short with everyone around her. The exact specific way she needed to be held after anxiety had passed. Not during, she needed space during, but exactly once it released, she needed contact. Small things. Invisible things. The kind of knowledge you don't acquire by going on 12 dates with 12 different people. The kind you only get by showing up, every day, for years, and actually watching. The men she was meeting didn't have that knowledge. They couldn't. They hadn't earned it. There wasn't a shortcut to it. And the men who might have stayed long enough to acquire it, she was scaring off. Because she'd absorbed Brooke's philosophy so completely that she was approaching every new connection as an audition rather than a beginning. She was evaluating constantly, holding at arm's length, assessing returns. And people can feel that. People can feel when they're being held at arm's length. They don't stay long when they feel it. 4 months after I left, I was in my kitchen making pasta, the narrow one with the courtyard window, when my phone showed a voicemail notification from a number I still had in my contacts. Her name. I stood at the counter and I listened to it. All 4 minutes of it. Her voice was different than I remembered. Quieter. More careful. Less certain of itself. She said she'd had a lot of time to think. She said she'd been unfair to me in ways she hadn't fully understood until she had the distance to see them. She said she'd been going through something professional that had made her feel like she had to be harder than she actually was, like softness was a liability, like being needed by someone meant she'd lost something. She said Brooke's voice had gotten louder in her head than her own voice. She said she treated me like something she could set down and pick back up whenever it was convenient. She said she wasn't calling to ask me to come back. She said she just needed me to know that she was sorry, that she knew what she'd done, and that it mattered to her that I knew she knew. She sounded like Cassie, not Cassandra. Cassie, the woman with the unguarded laugh who remembered everything. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after it ended, steam rising off the pasta water, the city doing its ambient thing outside. There was a pull. I want to be honest about this. I felt the pull of that voicemail, the pull of the version of her that was in it. Not a pull toward going back, but a recognition, the way you recognize a house you once lived in when you drive past it. Not wanting to go in, just acknowledging, something real happened here. I called her back. I know that surprises people when I tell this part, but she deserved a response, and I wasn't going to be the kind of person who leaves a 4-minute voicemail like that unacknowledged. She answered on the second ring, careful, like she was trying very hard not to hope too loudly. I told her I appreciated what she'd said. I told her I believed it was genuine. I told her she didn't need to ask for forgiveness because I'd already made my peace with everything that had happened. Then I told her the truth, clearly, and without cushioning it. I'm in a good place, I said. A genuinely good place. And I can't go back. Not because I'm angry with you, but because that door is closed, and I wouldn't reopen it even if nothing else in my life had changed. She was quiet for a moment. Is there someone else? She asked. That's not what this is about. I know, she said. I just needed to know. There is, I said. Okay. A long beat. Then she said something I genuinely wasn't expecting from her. I'm glad you found that. And I believed her. I genuinely believed her. We said goodbye. I have not spoken to her since. Several months later, I ran into Brooke. Of all places, a coffee shop 2 blocks from my apartment. She recognized me. I recognized her. We had the half-second of mutual acknowledgement where both people briefly consider whether they can pretend they haven't seen each other. She spoke first. Hey. Hey. How are you? Good. Really good. She looked at me for a moment, the same evaluating look she'd always had. Then something in her expression shifted. Just slightly. She misses you, Brooke said. In case you wanted to know. I nodded. I know, I said. She doesn't say it. But it's obvious. Tell her I hope she's well, I said. I mean that. Brooke studied me for another moment. The evaluation she was running this time felt different from every other time she'd done it. Like the criteria had changed. Yeah, she said. I will. I got my coffee. I walked home. The sun was out, thin and early spring uncertain, the kind that hasn't decided if it's staying. I thought about Cassandra, about the woman in that voicemail, about the fact that she'd had to lose me to find her way back to herself. What I felt wasn't pity. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't the clean triumph that people assume you feel when you win something like this. It was understanding. She had let someone else's voice replace her own. She had let her professional success become the only mirror she trusted to show her worth. She had confused having leverage over someone with being secure. And none of it, not the hardness, not the entitlement, not the careful positioning, had protected her from the thing she'd been most afraid of. Not abandonment, not being left. Something quieter than that. Being alone with herself. Having to look at who she'd become and decide what to do about it. That line she said in the kitchen, I've turned it over enough times now to understand what it actually was. It wasn't an evaluation of my worth. It wasn't a statement of fact about what I meant to her. It was armor. Armor made out of cruelty. The kind people build when they're terrified of needing someone. When vulnerability starts to feel like the most dangerous thing in a room. When you're so afraid of being the person who gets left that you become the one who does the leaving first. Emotionally, preemptively, from the safety of arrogance. She had been protecting herself. From me. From the specific risk of needing me. I understood that. I had compassion for it. I just hadn't been willing to stay and let it use me. 8 months after that kitchen. 8 months since you should be grateful I'm still here. My apartment doesn't feel borrowed anymore. It feels like mine. The narrow kitchen. The courtyard window. The morning runs I go on without explaining myself to anyone. The pasta I make on quiet evenings without adjusting for someone else's preferences. The long calls with my brother that go wherever they go. Vera and I are still doing what we've been doing. Not rushing anything. Not performing anything. Two people who decided to be honest with each other and then discovered that honesty, consistently applied, is actually quite a good foundation to build on. What we have is good. Quietly, solidly, genuinely good. Not the kind of good that needs to announce itself. The kind that just exists. I'm not going to tell you this story has a villain, because I don't think it does. Cassandra wasn't a monster. She was a person who had gotten lost in a version of herself that looked more powerful but was actually more frightened. Brooke wasn't a monster either. She was someone with a broken map who shared it freely with anyone who was willing to use it. I was just a man who loved someone completely for almost 3 years and finally, on an ordinary Thursday with an overcast sky, decided that love was not sufficient reason to keep standing in a space where I'd been told I was dispensable. There's a version of this story that goes differently. There's a version where I fold, where I call back, where I let her reframe the kitchen as a misunderstanding, where I stay and become gradually smaller until there's not enough of me left to recognize. I've seen that version happen to people I know. I know how it ends. It doesn't end well. It ends quietly. The worst way. The difference between the man who put his key on that counter and the man I'd been a year before is this. The man I'd been a year before needed her to confirm his value. Needed her to choose him back. Needed her acknowledgement to feel settled in himself. The man who walked out had already done that work. He just needed one moment, one kitchen, one careless sentence, to stop pretending he hadn't. She told me I was replaceable. She told me I was lucky to have her. She told me I had no standing, no claim, no right to feel like anything other than grateful. She believed all of it. And she was right about one thing. I didn't have leverage. Because leverage is something you use when you're trying to hold on. And I wasn't holding on to her. I was holding on to myself. When she went looking for what she'd lost, she found out that some things don't have an equivalent. They don't have a substitute. They don't get listed anywhere you can find them. They just exist, quietly, daily, without announcement, until the day they don't. And then the space where they used to be becomes the loudest thing in every room. That Thursday was ordinary in every visible way. Overcast sky, a note on a counter, a key beside it, a door closing softly. But what happened after it? Who she became without me, who I became without her, what I found when I stopped compressing myself to fit, that was anything but ordinary. She said I was replaceable. She couldn't replace me. I never gave her another chance to try. And somewhere in the quiet of that, in the space between what she believed and what turned out to be true, I found out exactly who I was. Turns out he was worth keeping.